Today we're going to talk about sprint planning and specifically a short to long progression and how to get the best results for your athletes. So we're going to talk about a short to long sprint approach. And for those of you who are not sure what short to long means, it really means we're going to start with very short distances and then build speed by lengthening those runs and just adding velocity every time we add a little bit more onto that segment. This is done over time to make sure that one, the athlete knows how to start and accelerate properly. Two, it's a good way to load the athlete in a way that doesn't provide so much intensity that there's a risk of injury or burning out. When you run over short distances, you don't get up to enough velocity to really have a huge impact on your nervous system and even your muscles and your just general energy systems. So what I want to focus on here is how do we plan that out so that it works to your advantage with your athletes, particularly team sport athletes, and adapt it to your circumstances, whether it's your timeline, your facility, your weather conditions. So we'll get into that. And all of this is covered in my running mechanics professional courses, either in person or online, and we do deeper dives into how to do this properly. But at least this is an introduction for you. So when we do a short to long program, a lot of the time I'll deal with shorter segments in the beginning. So this might be 10 yards. And then eventually, over time, we'll get out to longer distances. And this timeline here, it may be 6 weeks. It might be 3 months. It all depends on how much time you have. And we'll get into talking about how you plan that out. But in this case, it might be 10, then we go out to 15, then we go 20, 25, 30, and this is typical for a team sport athlete or even preparing somebody for something like a 40-yard dash. We try to build them gradually and work on technique in each of those phases. And the great thing about this approach is that your velocity builds gradually so that you don't overload somebody too quickly and you make sure the proper mechanics are in place phase by phase. So for most team sport athletes, they may not hit their top speed until we get to about this area here. So while their velocity is lower here, they can still work at 90 to 100% of their maximum effort and still get a good training session in and get all the proper muscles strengthened so when they go faster, they're ready. And of course, if you're working with track athletes, the progression may take longer and you may cover more ground in terms of the distances. So even though we may start with 10 yards for a track athlete for their starts and their early acceleration, we may start going out a lot further over this progression as well. So we might go 10, 30, 50, 80, 100, and even farther than that as part of our progression. If they're racing for the 100 meters, the 200 meters, the 400 meters, it doesn't matter. We're going to stretch that progression out and make sure these distances are covered properly. So a lot of the time when you're doing your plan, you're trying to figure out how much time do I have. You kind of work back from your goal. So if that's a training camp, a competition, a regular season, a combine testing event, you figure out how much time you have, and then you kind of interpolate between your start time and your finish time. But you have to be careful. So we're going to cover that right now. So what I mean by interpolating and making things fit is you may start on the left side of this graph and you may work towards your goal. So let's say the goal is I have to be ready for a 40-yard dash in 8 weeks. So this is our start position here, and we're going to assume that they come in with some degree of fitness. So for both volume and intensity, we can start here and we can work up to there. So the volume of work is low and the velocity intensity is low at the beginning here. So it actually works up towards our peak time. In this case, it's a combine event where you have to run a 40-yard dash and do a bunch of other tests, but we're going to keep this simple. We're just going to talk about the 40-yard dash. So a lot of the time, a straight line isn't a fair representation of what happens with your planning. What may actually happen is that you start a little easier and then you build things up a little quicker and then you level things off to taper down. So this line may actually look more sinusoidal, and you may actually bring training volume down before your peak event. So it might look something like this. And then we can get more complicated too in terms of volume and intensity and start separating things out. So let's do that. So if this is our regular theoretical training line of getting ready for an event and building the athlete up, what may happen with volume initially is your volume might increase more steeply and then start to flatten out and then sort of drop off as we start to taper down and get ready for the event. So this would be volume. But what might happen with intensity is you start a little lower, and you be careful, you don't want to injure people right away. So your intensity might start here, and then it might creep up to here, and then similarly drop off a bit as you taper down to submaximal levels. And that way it makes sure you're fresh in order to peak and have your best performance. But you can see there's a difference here. And what's great about a short to long approach is that if you're doing short sprints at the beginning, so say, let's divide this up. So if this is getting ready for a 40, we could probably divide it up into 2-week sections. So week 1 to 2, week 3 to 4, week 5 to 6, week 7 to 8. Okay, and we might go, okay, in the first bit, we're only gonna work over 10 yards. We may go a little farther, but I'm just using this for discussion purposes, right? And the great thing about the 10 yards is, remember, you can't run too fast, it's too short. So that satisfies our intensity requirement. A little lower, a little easier. But we can do a lot of these and we can build up volume really quickly. We can do them in sets of 5 and sets of 10, and we can build up volume and get somebody stronger. And then, as volume starts to level off and we decrease the number of reps, we start going out further. So we're out to 20-yard reps, okay? So instead of going 10 by 10 for 100 yards, we might go 5 to 6 by 20, which is 100 to 120. Okay, but we're also going faster. So this is going up, our intensity is going up. And especially if it's a skill position, let's plan for that. And then by week 5 to 6, we're out to 30. And so now they're going faster, approaching top speed. Most athletes will be around here, like I said, for their top speed capabilities. So we're out to 30. And then we get out to here, and we get out to 40. We run a couple of 40s. We don't always have to get out to 40 to prepare for a 40, but it is nice. So we might go in the first week, week 7, we might do some maximal work out to 40 just to get them ready. And then everything in the last week in their taper might be at 90 to 95%. And we cut the volume by about 30%, maybe 40%, and then that will keep them fresh for their actual testing date. But you see how a short to long approach works very well for getting somebody ready depending on your time. If this was 12 weeks, we would just stretch things out. If it was 16 weeks, even more. And if we had 16 weeks, we may spend more time at this distance getting them ready. But if you're a little squished for time, this approach still works well. You just have to make everything work together. Don't start too fast. Build your volume, get them fresh, get them fast and ready. So a short to long approach works very well under different circumstances for preparation. Like I said, combine test, getting ready for a tryout or a training camp, or if you're in track and field, getting ready for a race. And like I said, you'll be spreading things out in terms of the distances. But this is a good example, 40-yard dash prep, and it's all laid out here. So check out my Instagram pages at Derek M. Hansen or at Running Mechanics. And also my websites, sprintcoach.com and runningmechanics.com, to get more information. And I'm working on a planning course to really do a deep dive for runningmechanics.com so everybody understands how to get ready and make sure their athletes have the best chance to perform at their full potential.